Welcome, everybody. It is Monday. It is just after dinner time. That means it's time to talk Big Four Hoops. I'm Jonathan Snyder of Big4Hoops.com, joined by my man Mike Bunt, and we're here to talk another jam-packed yet disappointing overall season or week it was in the Big Four, Western New York's college hoop scene. So, Mike, like we do every week, we don't really chit-chat, we don't really dilly-dally. Let's dive right into it. But I think we're going to change our pace a little bit here. I think we normally start a little UB, a little Bana, but let's show some love to Niagara and the Niagara Purple Eagles, Mike. They now are over 500. They were able to take down former top recruit in the country, Amani Bates, and Eastern Michigan. I'm at home this weekend to get to 5-4 on the year. Mike, I know you want to talk a little bit about Niagara or a lot about Niagara and kind of what you've seen and trending in the right direction. So I want to pass it over to you. Obviously, the big name is they take down Bates. Eastern Michigan, not the greatest of opponents, but still a team for the Mid-American Conference. What impresses you right now about Greg Paulus' squad?
They're just playing quality basketball right now. I know Eastern Michigan is struggling out to a 2-9 start. They've lost to a lot of bad teams, but Amani Bates is going to be the most talented player on the court in most of the games he plays this season. And Niagara did a really, really good job of neutralizing him and really keeping him from having a high impact on this contest Sunday. Which Niagara won 67-60. I'm pulling up the stats right now, but overall in the game, Bates had 13 points, 5 of 10 shooting, 4 rebounds, 3 assists. Against a guy like that who Eastern Michigan basically lets have free reign to do whatever he wants, that's a good job containing him. And I thought this EMU game was a 50-50 game for Niagara. They were favored. The deeper metrics liked Niagara's chances of getting a win, but I don't think EMU is as bad as their metrics are right now. The metrics say that I'm just wanting to pull some of this stuff up. Sorry, I don't have it on me right now. The metrics say that EMU is one of the worst teams in America. They have them at number 300 in KenPom. They were picked 7th in the MAC to open the year. The 7th place MAC teams don't finish 300th in KenPom. I think a lot of what Eastern Michigan is going through right now is they have a bunch of they got a new star and they don't really have that chemistry built up right now, and they're struggling. But I thought it was going to be a tough test for Niagara, and they came out and they had a solid game. Noah Thomason continues to be a great number one scoring threat. 20 points in this game, 7 of 14 shooting, 4 assists. He's playing like a star. And then when you add in Aaron Gray with 12 points, and then Iorio with 10 boards, Niagara's just playing good basketball. And we'll get to their upcoming schedule in a little bit. But they have a bunch of winnable games coming up. So this is the time to pad their record during December, early January, where they can build up that confidence as they start approaching the meat of conference schedule in January.
Yeah, there's a few stats, Mike, that stand out to me. And I think we talked about this early in the season when they had the trip to Dublin about what it is they need to do to be successful. This isn't a team that's going to wow you with offensive skill. It's not a team that's going to wow you. They're not overly athletic. They're not going to, break the backboard by any stretch. But one thing I want to point out, Mike, there was only 54 rebounds corralled total in this game between both teams. And guess what? Niagara held a 6 rebound advantage. That's very important. In a game where each team, so it looks like, so if you look here, Eastern Michigan 54 possessions, Niagara only 50 possessions. I'm sorry, 50 field goal attempts. Niagara only turned it over 8 times, and Eastern Michigan 6, which means to tell you that, again, in order for this Niagara team to be successful, the pace needs to be slowed down, needs to be in their control and in their favor. And if you take a look, what's not only impressive, Mike, about Noah Thomason is he's an effective scorer. So a lot of times at low level you have, I don't mean to say low level like it's disrespectful to the Metro Atlantic, but when you get to the mid-major programs, you normally have one guy that averages usually in the high teens to low 20s, but normally their shot attempts equal their points scored, which is usually a basis for he's not an efficient scorer. Well, Thomason 7 of 14, so 14 field goal attempts, only 3 threes, scores 20 points, also has 4 assists. So he shoots 50%, but he's also 14 field goal attempts to get 20 points. Aaron Gray, 9 field goal attempts to get 12 points. Bryce Moore, 4 field goal attempts to get 8 points. Even Iorio, 6 field goal attempts to get 7. Lance Irving, 4 field goal attempts to get 4. David Mitchell off the bench, 6 field goal attempts to get 11. If you're Greg Paulus, that's the recipe for success. You need your guys to be efficient scorers. How are you efficient, Mike? You take good shots.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is one of the great things about Niagara. Like you said, I totally agree. Right now, they're benefiting from a slower pace, and it's working. And it's working because they're being efficient with their opportunities. Noah Thomason, 17 points per game this year, 45% shooting. That's a good job. Those are good numbers to be at, especially for your high volume shooter. Now, who's going to join him with that? So far, it's been Aaron Gray with the 10.6 rebounds. He's stepping up as a number 2. You need him to get better than 38%. He needs to improve on that number overall. But then you got the group of a million guys, Sam Iorio, like you said, Bayless, Moore, Mitchell, Irving, where they don't have that number 3 threat, but they're splitting the responsibility. I just want to go through some of the Ken Palm stuff with Niagara quickly, John, if you're okay with it. Right now, their adjusted efficiency on offense is 241 in the country. On defense, it's 201 in the country. So those are still areas that they can improve on overall. Defensively, they could force a higher percentage of turnovers according to the numbers. They're struggling defending the 3-point line. But a couple areas that they're doing pretty well in right now is they're playing well 2-point percentage defense, 85th in the country, holding people to 46.8% from 2-point land. And then when you look at some of the other numbers, they have rooms that they can continue to get better. So I think it's encouraging right now that they're over 500 in spite of not playing what I would say great basketball, but they have a veteran leader in Thomason who is embracing that primary scoring role. They have a number 2 man developing in Aaron Gray. And you look at the upcoming schedule, John. I know we don't have a graphic for it, but their next about 6 games are all winnable. NJIT, number 340 in Ken Palm. Binghamton, 331 in Ken Palm. Mount St. Mary's, that's going to be a conference game this year, 206. Ryder, 200. Fairfield, 243. Manhattan, 315. I've been saying all season, Ken Palm is actually favorable to Niagara. They think Niagara is going to have a winning record at 16-13 overall. And you look at this stretch of 5 games right here, there's no reason that Niagara can't go 3-2, 4-1. It'd be disappointing for them to have a losing record during this stretch. So at 5-4, I'm expecting Niagara to be no worse than 8-6 when they're done with this stretch. NJIT is one of the worst teams in the country, according to Ken Palm. Like I said, right now their lone win was against Sacred Heart. This is an NJIT team that has lost to 329 Fairleigh Dickinson, lost to St. Peter's already, has lost to Bucknell by 16, which obviously Niagara lost to as well, and then lost to 294 Army. That needs to be a win, even if it's on the road. Binghamton, 331 in Ken Palm. Their lone wins against 295 Marist and 349 Columbia. This Binghamton team has lost to 334 Stonehill. I didn't even know Stonehill had a D1 basketball program. I don't even know where Stonehill is. So not to be condescending and rude, but you can see those are both games that an improving Niagara team needs to get wins over. Mount St. Mary's, maybe that could go either way, but you got a couple home conference games at the end of this year, beginning of 2023. So this is where you pad your record. And if they do, chance to build your confidence and maybe have set the precedent to have the best year. And Greg Paulus's tenure with the Purple Eagles.
Yeah. Mike, you said a lot there, and one thing I do want to kind of piggyback off of you is the schedule, right? So we'll pull that back up, Mike. And I want to just you talked about the games, but let's not forget those 3 games in the middle are all at home. So you have the Binghamton game at home, and then you have 2 conference games at home between Mount St. Mary's and Rider. If any of those games you want on the road, it's probably the NJIT game. All right, it's not that far. If maybe the Binghamton game, it's a little closer. But if you want any of those games on the road, it's probably NJIT. Then you come back home, you get comfortable over the holiday break. It's tough to travel during the Christmas break. And, these guys will be at home on the 21st. They won't have to leave. They're back home on the 30th. So they can stay in that practice routine. They can stay fresh. They can stay, keep their rhythm going on. I want to pull up a team stat, though, real quick, Mike. One thing we forget is this team's already played Maryland, Bucknell, and St. John's. And they still only have a point differential of minus 0.9 points per game, Mike. So they're scoring 65.1, and they've given up 66 a game. That's not bad considering the schedule that they faced. They're holding teams to 42% from the field. They're shooting 44 themselves, all right? One other stat I want to take a look at, Mike, is rebounding. And they're actually out-rebounding their opponents on average, okay, by almost 2 rebounds a game. So when you take a look at the schedule, you take a look at Bucknell, you take a look at St. John's, take a look at Maryland, maybe even Stetson, those 2 games, and those were not easy games as well. When you're still able to out-rebound your opponents on average with what I feel is like I said, not the most athletic team in the world. So you're not, the guards aren't going to be rebounding at a super high level. That's impressive. And I think that just comes down to hard work, being in the right place at the right time, and being gritty. And that's what you have to be at this level. This will kind of transition us into our next topic, Mike. We're going to stay in the Metro and talk about Canisius, but it comes down to what are the expectations of these 2 programs? Okay, are the expectations to make the NCAA tournament? I don't think so. Are the expectations to win double-digit games? I think they're a little higher than that. I think what the expectation is to be competitive within the conference. And I think through 9 games this year, Niagara's kind of confirmed or put us in the direction to believe that they are going to be competitive in the Metro and a little bit more competitive. They're going to win some games they shouldn't, and they're going to surprise some people. And I think if they're able to maintain this level, like I said, at this, they could drop off. They could drop a game to NJIT or Binghamton and lose this little bit of momentum that they got. But I think if they keep the same recipe, slow the game down in their favor, right, limit the possessions, continue to play good defense, and continue to rebound at a high level, I don't think they'll drop either one of those games. And then obviously conference play against Mount St. Mary's and Rider, anything happens in conference play.
I think, yeah, I agree with you. And I think this win against EMU, backed by a win over Quinnipiac, tells me that this Niagara team could and maybe should be better than what the preseason expectations were for them. And that while they're not going to be a contender at the top of the conference with Iona, that they could be a middle of the pack team that's battling for 4th, 5th, 6th place. They could still be a 7th, 8th, 9th place team, but I think they have the ability to compete with some of the better teams in this league outside of Iona. And it's not a conference that is having a dominant year by any standard. It's the number 20 Ken Pom conference. Outside of Iona, a lot of mediocrity. So I do think Niagara could, once you get past Iona, have a chance to be in that middle of the pack.
Yeah, and I think one team, unfortunately, that's probably not going to be in the middle of that pack, Mike. They'll probably be bringing up the rear is our buddies on Main Street over there, the Golden Griffins, Reggie and company squandering really just a tremendous opportunity to pick up what would have been their biggest win of the season, even with the Bonaventure game. Toledo, Mike, you watched that game intently. Talk us through kind of what happened at the end of that game.
It's one of those old stories where good teams find a way to close, bad teams don't. Canisius had every opportunity to win this game. They took the lead with around 9 minutes left. They held the lead up until the final minute, had a ton of chances to really get this game out of reach. A 3-pointer off the mark could have given them a 7-point lead with about a minute and a half left. And then Toledo just they made clutch shots, and just a lack of execution by the Golden Griffins. They had a chance at a layup to take the lead with about around 20 seconds left, just under that. They get the ball back after it went out of bounds, and then after calling a timeout, the ensuing inbounds, they end up stepping out of bounds before even getting a shot off, which is incredibly disappointing. Toledo would go on to make free throws, make it a 3-point lead. They fouled twice in those scenarios after making both free throws. So Canisius went to the line 2 times in the final 10 seconds of the game, where you make the first free throw and then you try to intentionally miss the second one to get a rebound and hopefully a kick out to either tie or win the game. Both times that Canisius tried to intentionally miss the free throw, they made it. And it set up a situation where Todd Kowalczyk in Toledo did one of the dumbest things I've ever seen. They had 4 players on the baseline trying to send them deep like a football formation, went for basically 3/4 of the court length pass with about 2.5 seconds remaining. Canisius player gets his arm on it, gets it to half court, and Canisius had a prayer that was nearly answered as time expired. But long story short, with Canisius, they didn't make the plays that they needed to put them away. And it really is unfortunate because it was all there for them. Canisius out-rebounded Toledo 48-36. Canisius had 17 offensive rebounds to 8 for Toledo. They got JT Shoemate in foul trouble. So he had 20 points, fouled out of the game. So he wasn't even a factor in the final minutes of this game. Turnovers, though, costly once again. 21 turnovers for Canisius. It's incredible that they were even in this game with that amount of turnovers. And that's the disappointing thing, because Toledo opened this year number 4 in the mid-major top 25 poll. You and I both know the talent they have based on covering them against UB the past 5 years. They had a player drafted in the NBA draft last year. So we know that Toledo has good players. And you look at it, Taj Szyzewski had 19 points, 6 rebounds. Henderson, 17 points, 5 rebounds. Jocko Fritz, 12 points, 12 rebounds. It was all there. It was all there for the taking. And like I said, they couldn't finish the game.
It just seems like one of those games, Mike, where this could have been like a little bit of a whoa, not so fast. Like, don't write us off yet. Kind of like the Bonda game. And it just would have been one of those games that it reminds me of, honestly, back at UB when Reggie would just sometimes they'd be on a little bit of a downward spiral, and boom, he'd fire off a big conference win, right? 2 in a row, and you'd be like, they're back, right? Or he'll win the 3 games going into the MAC tournament, and then they, steal the number 2 seed and get beat. It just felt like one last effort to save this season, and I know we're talking about saving the season here on what it is, December 12th. But that's kind of what it felt like, Mike. And it does feel like this is kind of a lost season. Ty Szyzewski's going to probably have like 17 MAC Rookie of the Year week awards by the end of the year. And unfortunately, they're probably not going to mean anything because they'll probably leave after this year.
I don't want to say it's saving the season yet. While Niagara, we're talking about goals, we're winning record, middle of the pack in the conference. I think for Canisius, it's more so find a way to avoid going back to the depths of Tom Parada. I don't think anybody expects this Canisius team to be a 17, 18 win team. And I'm not saying 11, 12, 13 wins is a success. But I do believe the non-conference for this squad is just to get them prepared for MAC play.
Sure. I can agree with that.
If they're around 500 in MAC play with this squad, I think that's what you're really hoping for at this
But do you
moment.
see that, though, Mike? Do you see 500 in conference play with this squad?
It's tough. I will say it is tough to see it right now. Ken Palm has Canisius going 10-19 overall and 7-13 in conference play. When they played Siena on the road, they gave Siena quite the game. So I don't want to give up on Canisius yet, because Siena is a team that's probably going to be pretty good in the MAC this year.
Well, you know how I feel. You know how I feel about conference play, Mike. You know how I feel about any league,
I mean,
starting with the ACC down to the.
I know, John. Conference games are tough, but that Siena team has beaten Seton Hall and Florida State, and I know Florida State stinks this year, but they did beat Florida State. They gave Georgetown a game, albeit a pretty crappy Georgetown squad. But I think it's too early to give up on the year and say these games are to save the season. Looking at the schedule, Penn State, you can almost assure a loss.
They just beat the
situation.
Part of my language, Mike. They just beat the shit out of Illinois the other day.
Yeah, so Penn State will be a loss, which will drop them to 2-8. Then you're talking Florida Gulf Coast on the road. Could they win? Possibly. Ken Palm gives them an 18% chance. So you're looking at probably 2-9 heading into conference play. And that's when we're going to see what this Canisius squad is made of. Because are you going to tell me Ryder, Mount St. Mary's, Manhattan, St. Peter's, Marist, Siena, Fairfield, any of those squads are dramatically better than Canisius? I don't think so.
No, that's a good point.
So
that's a good point, Mike, because they're probably not, right? A lot of those teams are probably all the same talent-wise. But we just opened the segment talking about good teams find a way and bad teams don't find a way.
That's the thing, John, that we're talking about. The one thing I do want to talk about this Canisius schedule is they haven't given themselves an easy non-conference slate. And I would argue that they've given themselves a more difficult non-conference slate than what a lot of teams that are lower mid-majors would. Youngstown State, not traditionally a good opponent. This year, they have a coach that brought in some quality transfers, and they've been difficult. It was a 11-point loss, but Canisius was playing competitive with them. You beat St. Bonaventure, which is 127 in Ken Palm. You probably should have beaten Toledo. UB, not a typical UB team, but still quality opponent. Cornell, not great, but not awful either. So, and then the MAC factor in Iona for a MAC game in Penn State. So, yes, the start of the year definitely concerning, but I don't think this Canisius team stinks. I don't think they're good. But if you're going to ask me, are they like the Tom Parada teams that would struggle to get to 10 wins? I don't think they're that level bad. I think right now it's more so they've been falling short in games against competition that's slightly ahead of them overall. And then against the better teams, it's difficult for a program that's going to be in the mid 200s and lower 200s in Ken Palm to win those games. So
I'll agree with you about the Tom Parada days, and me and you covered those teams pretty in-depthly back in our college days. But the thing about the Parada days was that when Canisius won, it was legitimately shocking. It was, and I like Tom Parada was always a nice guy, right? But when they won, it was shocking. If Gabby Bilardo didn't take 37 shots, it was shocking, right? This
feels like? This feels like Mike McDonald when he overdid his welcome at Canisius. So in the beginning, after Beeline left and McDonald took over, Canisius had a couple good years in the late 90s, early 2000s. They had a couple seasons where you're like, you know what, they got some talent on this squad, and they made, I believe, the MAC finals the one year. And when it was in Buffalo, maybe around like 2000, 2001, I got to pull up the numbers. It's been such a long time. Yeah. I was too young at that time to really remember too much of the specifics, but it feels, and that's when I really got into Canisius basketball, and I was a season ticket holder. But at the end, it was, how are we going to get to 10 wins this year? We're going to be 10-19, 10-18, 10-20, and that's what it kind of feels a little bit with Reggie right now, where they've kind of they had their little run of success early in his tenure, and now it's kind of run its course. And some of the people on their board had some good points where it's like Canisius isn't going to move, is most likely not going to move on from Reggie. So what's going to happen is he's going to get to the point where he has a year left on his contract, and he kind of becomes what I would imagine will probably become a lame duck head coach, where they're not going to want to extend him most likely. I'm assuming this. I don't have any inside information, but Reggie isn't going to probably want to walk away and resign either. So I think it's all heading to a point where eventually they're going to have to both agree to mutually part ways in the future at some point, because
so this team
they're not rebuilding this. They're not. This isn't going to get better while he's there.
In this team right now, they're 2-9. Okay, with 2 non-conference. I'm sorry, they're 2-7. I apologize. With 2 non-conference games left against Penn State, Florida Gulf Coast. I won't write them off the Florida Gulf Coast game. It's a slim possibility, but let's just say they even win it, right? They go into, they continue conference play 3-8. If they hit that 7-13 mark like you talked about, that puts them at 10 wins. All right, 7-13 probably puts you somewhere in that 6 to 8 range in the Metro. I think a lot of people, Canisius fans, alumni, players, coaches, would probably take that at this point, because if you can get there and you can win some games at the end of the year, surprise some teams, and learn a little bit about yourself, I think you make a really good point with the schedule. And normally that's kind of like an excuse when teams don't win games. Oh, the non-conference slate is so tough and we got challenged. That's to me like kind of more or less an excuse. But I think you're right. I don't think it's like an excuse this time. I think it was done logistically, maybe knowing that this team didn't have the it factor. And let's just say, let's challenge ourselves as much as possible. Let's take our licks, because we're not getting an at-large anyways. We're not going to the NIT. Let's take our licks. And let's be as prepared as possible. Maybe we lose some of these close games. Maybe we win some of these close games. And let's see if we can not lose those close games against St. Peter's in January or Ryder in February. So I do think there's some good that comes out of like a Toledo loss like that. But I also think that there's only so many of those losses that you can take, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to continue to take those, because at the end of the day, this is not Little Cages. This isn't AAU. This isn't we're not taking – there's not as many moral victories to be had at this level.
It's different if you're a young roster and you believe it's a core that you can keep from transferring and entering the portal. It's different when you have a squad like that, because when you believe you have something that you can build upon, you're okay with maybe giving up a year on development. That doesn't have the feel right now with Canisius. It'd be a little bit different if that was the case. Like maybe when Bana had Dominic Welch, Osuna Suni, and Kyle Lofton, it was okay that they struggled as freshmen, because you knew that they were building towards something. And eventually at the end of the year, they started getting it rolling. But right now, the one player you would be talking up if you wanted to talk about the future would be Taj Savesky. And as a freshman to be 14 points a game, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 steal, that's honestly not even just encouraging. That's a tremendous
impressive. Mike, that's not all rookie. That stuff. That's maybe second team all that stuff.
So that is something for Canisius to be very encouraged about, because how many freshmen come right away in college basketball and look the part right away? So I do want to give props to him. He is playing tremendous. Could get his field goal percentage up a little bit, but through 9 games, love what I'm seeing from him. Hopefully he's a guy that Canisius can keep around, because what you're seeing now is these freshmen that do put up these numbers. A lot of them are trying to transfer to A-10 schools and bigger conferences after that freshman year. That's what St. Bonaventure literally just did this offseason, is they just scoured all of the America East, NEC.
It would be nice. It would be nice, Mike, if Reggie was able to maybe go get, like we talked about last week, 1 or 2 local guys, combine it with another freshman, get 1 or 2 transfers, and keep a couple of these guys like him there. And now he's the veteran on this squad. I think that would be, his best bet. He's not getting Boston College transfers. He's not going to go
No,
get
no.
3 stars. So I think that's the best bet.
You can get quality players to come to a Canisius or a Niagara. We've seen people go to Iona. We've seen people go to UB. We've seen people go to St. Bonaventure and other lower level schools like Bryant. If Bryant, which was a program that would struggle to win 2 or 3 games a decade ago, can get quality players and then now go to Syracuse and pull off a win.
Yeah.
You can quickly turn around your program if you're aggressive enough. So I do think that's something that Canisius and Niagara both need to start looking into more in the future. And I got one last stat on Canisius. Their all-time win-loss record is 13-39 and 13-21. A lot of people locally probably don't realize they have a winning record in their history. But right now,
I didn't know that. It's pretty
only 18 games over 500 at the current moment. So depending on how this season and next season go, they could drop below 500 overall in program history. So not that really matters.
No, that's pretty interesting, though.
But something to monitor the next couple seasons.
Like, I want to add one quick thing about Canisius, and one thing that I can give you a little bit from my little coaching experience in college. The one thing about these tough games in non-conference, you schedule these games and you lose them. I get that you're playing these tough teams, but to these kids, losing is demoralizing. No matter if you play Alabama 12 times in the non-conference, it is demoralizing. Okay, and too many losses, your team can mentally shut off. Okay, it cannot give it all in practice. It cannot, and they don't even do it by choice. These kids love the game, but losing is demoralizing. They don't really look at the nets, RPIs. They don't know what that is, right? These metrics. So when they see Penn State on the schedule, that's the same as the Uville to them. Okay, and so most of them, some of them know, but a lot of these guys are just ready to play basketball, and they don't really look at Florida Gulf Coast any differently than they look at Binghamton or Stonehill, right? They just look at them the same way. So when you lose a lot of games, it is demoralizing. So I hope for their sake they could steal one of these next two. It'll most likely have to be the Florida Gulf Coast game, but steal one of those, get some momentum into conference play, and get these kids playing fun and happy. But I think that if they can steal one and go into conference play, that would be really good for Reggie and company. But let's keep going, Mike. UB Bana, I put struggle. I don't know how else to put it. 2 really defeating losses. Not to lack of quality of opponents. I mean, they played good teams, but Mike, not necessarily the fight I think either of us would have liked to see out of both those teams.
Yeah, let's start with UB. I think we both know it's going to be kind of a roller coaster year. And if you watch our show, it seems like each week we go from up to down to back up on the squad. So right now we're down after this past game. Maybe a week from now we'll be talking their praises. Obviously, this past week they had the St. John Fisher game, which is just a free win for the program and just a chance to get some of their younger guys, more inexperienced guys, some time on the court. And then Tulane, which, first off, the fact that game, I believe it wasn't even televised, which is odd.
You took the words out of my brain that I was just thinking about. That game, what a terrible setup that was. 11:30 in the morning, no streaming setup, nothing.
That's a joke to me in the year 2022. But it was always going to be a tough opponent for UB. I'm just pulling up
6
the
and
Ken
3
Palm right now. Tulane entered 86 in Ken Palm.
6 and 3. They got an exhibition win over Spring Hill.
Tulane killed them. If we're just being real, Tulane killed them. UB shot 31% from the field. Awful shooting display. Tulane 47%. UB had the rebounding advantage, but a lot of that is because they had 17 offensive boards because they only hit 31% of their shots. And what we've been saying in recent weeks really is that for this UB squad to be successful and play at their best, they need Curtis Jones and Zid Powell to lead the way. And I love what Curtis Jones and Powell have done this year, but That was just not their day overall. The two combined to go 5 of 22 from the field. Curtis Jones was 1 of 9, 4 points, 1 assist. Powell 11 points on 4 of 13 shooting. When you factor in that, then your complementary guys, Foster 1 of 4, Isaiah Adams 3 of 9, Smith 2 of 6, Harden at 2 of 5, Jack 2 of 6, Caesar 1 of 4. It was an all-around horrible display of shooting by everyone on the squad. Turnovers were an issue. 16 turnovers, only 5 takeaways. Tulane kind of just kicked their butt, and that's all that you can really say about it. But it's not something to panic about if you're UB. We know that games like this are going to happen this season. It's a squad that is a new starting 5 trying to take over for what was a good run with Janathan, Mbala, and Rondo Segou, even though they never played to the expectations that fans and myself wanted them to be at. But you look at UB coming up, you got SUNY Canton sandwiched in between 23 West Virginia and 38 Michigan State and Ken Palm. So you're probably looking at most likely 1 win in those 3 games. You're probably going to be 6 and 7 entering conference play. And then what a way to get started playing the Ohio Bobcats. UB's probably the closest thing UB has to a rival when it comes to basketball or football in the MAC currently. And you guys all know I went to Ohio, so I'll have my eyes glued on that game. And then Northern Illinois, which for some reason, even when UB was playing some of their best basketball, has always been a kryptonite for UB in recent years, being able to win games that you just couldn't believe that they were able to pull out against the Bulls. So long way of saying, John, we're going to see some ups and we're going to see some downs. Hopefully UB can pull out a shocker one of these next 2 big games against West Virginia or Michigan State, but doesn't really seem very likely based on the evidence so far we've seen this season.
Yeah, I don't think the loss, like the actual L, is what's alarming, Mike. I think it's the inconsistency of the losses and the way that they're losing that is alarming to me. We're 10 games into the season, plus an exhibition, plus I'm sure a scrimmage or 2. So you're anywhere from 11 to 13, game actions on top of the inter-squad scrimmages you have in October into the season. This team, again, we didn't get to watch the Tulane game, but just from the box score, this team continues to lack an identity. And that's not a shot or a criticism of the players. They're talented players that I don't know if they're being used in a system that's designed for their best interest. And again, that's not something that's like Jim Weitzel saying, "Oh, I don't want to put these guys in a position to be successful." It's probably him haven't figured out yet how this team needs to play in order to be successful. Either that or the players aren't listening to that method. But I've watched some of their games, obviously leading up to that Tulane game. There's so many ill-advised shots, Mike. The number of ill-advised shots to me from a team that doesn't seem like it's excellent at shot making is just, it's not going to lead to consistent success. You can get hot. You can have a guy like Curtis Jones. He went for 30 plus, right, in the last game, but that's not going to happen every day. Scoring 30 in college doesn't happen every day. So the having an identity or a way to overcome one player's struggles is what makes good teams or average teams good and good teams great. So I have yet to see an identity from this team. The box scores are very inconsistent. Some days they rebound well, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they take care of the basketball, sometimes they don't. But one thing that has been very consistent is the ill-advised shots. I'd like to see that number cut down. I'd like to see them take a few less possessions, get better shots. I think that'll lead to better defense too.
It's reflective in their 3-point shooting. You look at Ken Palm, they have them as 339th in the country in their 3-point shooting overall. So That's 21, I think, from the bottom. I believe there's 360 right now.
29%, Mike.
Yeah, so that's just not going to get it done. Two-point field goal percentage, not bad, 134. That's actually an area they're a little bit above average. Some of their offensive numbers actually aren't horrible. They're a good free throw shooting team. They're good with the 2-point shots. Their 3-point shooting is definitely a concern. Their
Well, Mike,
turnover.
what does that equal, right? What does that equal? If they're good inside the arc and they're good at the line, which how do you get to the line? You get to the line by attacking, taking high percentage shots. Take away the 3 ball, those other numbers get even better, and they're probably more successful.
I mean, if you want to overly simplify it, you would say attack more, take fewer ill-advised
one thing
shots
these
from
guards are
outside.
good at, Mike, is they're good off the dribble. They're quick. Okay, Foster's quick, Caesar's quick. All right, these guys are quick. So I'm not saying they have the ability to go up, finish over these big bodies in the middle that they've been playing, but getting into the paint and the ability to attack off the dribble because they're so quick will open up dish offs or drop offs in the paint, right, to Hartnett or Jack or Smith or any of those guys like that. Or what it will do is it will give you better looks from 3.
Yeah.
So if you are able to penetrate consistently, kick it to the corner, swing it, a couple extra passes, now you've got defense moving. Now you're getting better shots. But when you just jack up a 3, 8 to 10 seconds into the shot clock, guess
That
what?
needs to
That
be
creates long rebounds, outlets, high percentage shots for the other team.
And what's also interesting is for as bad as UB is right now offensively with the 3-pointer, that's actually the best part of their defense is defending the 3-pointer. They're 65th in the country according to Ken Palm at 30%. But they've been struggling defending teams inside. They've been allowing teams 53.5%, which is 283rd in Ken Palm. So it's funny. On offense, they're jacking up too many threes when they're good attacking the hoop and getting the ball inside the 3-point line. But on defense, they're good at stopping teams from shooting a solid percentage, but they're weak inside the line, which is a little bit concerning because you think that when you're practicing against each other, you'd be able to maybe attack those weaknesses, but it's obviously something that they're struggling early on this year. Same thing with turnover percentage. They're struggling with turnover percentage on offense, but defensively, they're above average at forcing turnovers. Adjusted efficiency on offense and defense is 190 and 191 in the country out of 360. So right now, I think the numbers really do reflect what our eyes are seeing, and it's a very, very average UB squad. Before the year, I said 15 to 18 wins for this squad, and I think we're probably looking closer to that 15 or 16 number, give or take. A nice win or 2 in MAC play against a better opponent. Right now, Ken Palm has them at 16 and 15 overall, 10 and 8 overall in the conference. And I think we'll see early on in January if this team is one that will be able to elevate itself in conference play and be a contender, or if they're going to be a middle of the pack squad. I will say this. I think Kent State has established themselves as the best in the MAC. They nearly upset number 2 Houston. They gave Gonzaga a game on the road. No one else in the MAC has that ability at this point in time. Toledo was expected to be a MAC power, but when they're struggling against Canisius, when they're struggling against some of the teams that they have faced this year, I think they lost to Kansas City. I don't have the faith in Toledo that I had before the year. Ball State was picked to finish 3rd in the MAC. I don't think anybody would say Ball State is scary. I respect them, but I don't think anybody would say that they are elite. Akron, you always have to respect them, but that doesn't mean that they're great either. Ohio is a rebuilding year for the Bobcats. I say that as it hurts me. They nearly upset Michigan on the road, but they also lost to Detroit Mercy by 25, and they have some very young players that they're trying to get minutes as they also deal with the transfer portal and a lot of roster turnover. So, and then EMU with Imani Bates, as we said earlier in the show, they're 2-9. So this is a MAC that is wide open for UB. So while the non-conference has been up and down. There's two ways this can go. UB can get this roster together, figure everything out, and they could roll in the MAC. They could go, they could win 12, 13 games in the MAC and erase all these preseason fears, or they could continue to be up and down all MAC season, which is probably the more likely scenario, and be maybe a few games over 500 heading into Cleveland, and then see where it goes. Hopefully somebody knocks off Kent State and wide open.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. I love mid-major conference play, so I'm ready to see these teams kind of beat the crap out of each other in a good way. They really do beat each other up, and normally the strongest willed teams come out and win. The teams that are able to overcome a little adversity, overcome when they don't have their A game or their number one option isn't working. So hopefully all these trials and tribulations that UB is going through will allow them to kind of find that. Maybe if they don't find their actual identity, they find their alter ego. They find their other persona, right? And they go to that more. Maybe what they're not the best at, but it helps them win games. Or maybe they got to win games in the 50s or 60s. Maybe they're a better defensive team.
I don't think you will ever see that with this current collection of guys.
No. But maybe they're better defensively than they think they are. But because they take so many shots, play at a high pace, they can't be as good as they are. I don't know what the answer is, Mike, but we do want to talk about St. Bonaventure too. And unfortunately, a loss for them as well against Iona. We know how good Iona is. I don't think we thought they were 20 points better on a neutral floor over St. Bonaventure. Here, I'll just pull up their upcoming schedule now. But, Mike, I think again, we talk about the consistency. 72-57 loss in Brooklyn to Iona in a game that Bonaventure was slightly in the first half. It was a 4-point game at halftime, but they ended up losing the second half by 11, only scored 28 and 29 points respectively in both those halves. We know they're going to struggle a little bit offensively, but I don't think we thought that a Metro team, even as good as Iona, was going to thoroughly dominate the Bonnies on a neutral floor.
Yeah, this was a game that St. Bonaventure had some struggles in. It was competitive going into the final 10 minutes. It was a back and forth game, and then around 7 minutes left, Iona just took control and ran with it from there. I don't want to be too critical of St. Bonaventure because their fans can jump on you if they catch a video and they don't like what you have to say. But I think I'm getting to the point where I do not have a huge amount of faith in their guard play. When it comes to Daryl Banks, he was not a great player at St. Peter's. He capitalized off of his NCAA tournament run with the Peacocks last year, and it's been a struggle for him so far this season. You look at his career in St. Peter's, the 3 years leading into this, 33.9%, 35.7%, 38.3% from the field. His three-point shooting has always been a little bit above average. But right now you have Banks taking 4 shots more per game right now than he did last year at St. Peter's. He's playing 13 more minutes, but he's shooting 35.8% from the field. That's not going to get it done.
Yeah.
3.1 rebounds per game to 2.3 turnovers. So his assist to turnover ratio is not spectacular by any means. He's averaging 16 points per game, but you watch him, he was a decent MAC player. He is not a good A10 player. He's a volume player. He puts up numbers because he puts up shots. He doesn't score because he's being efficient. And I think that's going to be something that is going to really hold St. Bonaventure back this year. Kyrell Luke, I like that addition better because of him being younger when he came to St. Bonaventure. He is playing decently overall, 15 points a game, 41.5% from the field, 5 assists per game. I like Kyrell Luke. I think if he was a little bit taller, he would be considered a really good player. But this Bonnet team it's all going to be about development. And we've mentioned the 3 guys repeatedly this year. It's about Chad Venning, it's about Barry Evans, and then Jan Farrell. Jan Farrell is the highest talent on this team. He's the player St. Bonaventure needs to develop and turn into a star. Chad Venning, I don't think he is a star, but I think with his big body, he needs to be that post presence that St. Bonaventure feels like they can toss the ball in the paint, let him go get two, be a defensive presence. And Barry Evans, he's a freshman, and there's going to be growing pains. Obviously, you watch him, he has raw athleticism, he has ability. It's taking time to put it all together. What's killing this Bonnet team, as usual, with Coach Schmidt, unfortunately, is that this team does not have a bench. And you can get away with not having a bench when you have a starting five that is sensational, like they've had the last couple seasons. But when you have two guards that can be hot and cold, when you have two freshmen in your starting five, and then Venning, who could be prone to foul trouble at times, there's going to be a lot of growing pains. I think with some of these guys, by the time they get to next year, later in this season, next year, we're going to be talking about a completely different story with St. Bonaventure. But for now, I think you're looking at more of a middle of the pack to lower A10 squad that might hover around 500, might be a little bit better than 500, but you're looking at probably 16 to 18 wins overall. I would imagine for this squad. And Ken Palm right now says 17 and 14, 9 and 9 and A10. I would agree with Ken Palm's projection. That's kind of right where I would have them overall.
Yeah. Mike, I think I'll go back to my favorite word on this show is identity, identity, identity. We got so used to knowing exactly what we were going to get out of the Bonnies day in and day out when those five guys were there. And I think it's because everybody on that squad knew their role. And I'm just not sure yet that everybody knows their role on this Bonaventure team. Not having a bench is a killer. It's a killer. Not having the breather. Daryl Banks plays 40 minutes. I mean, you can look at guys, and everyone wants to play 40 minutes, but they know they shouldn't play 40 minutes. We have a guy at Bryan and Stratton right now who's scoring, 25 a game and playing less than 25 minutes per game. So he's the leading scorer in the country at their level, and he's playing less than 25 minutes per game. And I think if you're Mark Schmidt, you're okay with those numbers from Daryl Banks, and they're still good numbers, 16 and a half a game. But Mike, you talked about the field goal percentage, 35%, and he's having to play 39 minutes to get you 16 points. So I think his efficiency is dropping because he's tired. I don't think he played 40 minutes a game at St. Peter's, and if he did, it was probably in the last couple of games of the year when they were beating up the likes of the of the monsters in the national tournament.
And keep this up, because you look at the guards: Banks 39, Luke 36. Moses Flowers transferred from Hartford, being a double-digit scorer for them. And granted, Hartford is a program that's transitioning out of D1, so you could argue he wasn't really doing it at a high level. I guarantee you the Bonnies were hoping more than 4.9 points per game on 36% shooting from the field out of an upperclassman. That's your first guard off the bench.
15 minutes is just, it's still good time.
It's still good time, but you're not getting any production.
And that's not good. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's a good amount of time to be on the floor to not get much.
Yeah, and Maluk, really, you're not getting a ton of value when he is in the game. And outside of that, look at the rest of it. You're Anquan Hill. Like there's no other production there. And
here's the thing I'll say about Flowers too, Mike. If you take a look at Flowers' minutes, they're very inconsistent. So 15, 8, 14, 6, 23, 8, 22, 11, 24, right? My question would be, again, the identity. I just don't see the consistency. Normally, now you're entering conference play. You want to have your rotation somewhat kind of consistent at this point. Obviously, foul trouble, game flows, who's hot, who's not, that all affects it, right? But when you got a guy who's consistently up and down, it's almost like he knows if he played 8 minutes a game before, he's playing 22 the next day, you know?
When you talk about identity, I think the one identity you have for St. Bonaventure is that they're going to let their starters do their thing, whether it's good or bad. They're going to ride their starters and just go with it however it ends up flowing. Daryl Banks is going to see the court for almost every minute of every game. He's going to put up a lot of shots, and it's going to be good sometimes, and it's going to be very ugly sometimes, which means there's going to be games that Bono wins that they probably have no right winning, but there's going to be games against teams like Canisius that they'll lose, that they have no right losing. And Daryl Banks, I'm not really overly concerned about, because in the end, he's going to move on, and there will be another point guard that will eventually take his spot with this young core. Kyrell Luke,
Banks has got 2
Kyrell
years.
Luke has talent.
Banks has 2 years, right?
I would assume so if they have a COVID year. I would have to look more into that. But Kyrell Luke has ability. He's going to be part of this future. Venning is part of the future. Evans is part of the future. Farrell's part of the future. I'm not concerned about Banks long term if I'm just keeping it real. Banks is a solid college player. I respect what he brings to the table, but he would not be a person I would be having on the court 39 minutes unless it's a necessity, which unfortunately for St. Bonaventure and the squad, it is a necessity. But even with these negatives that we've talked about right now on the show, I do want to point out some of the positives with St. Bonaventure quickly before we wrap up, because Ken Pom still has them at 127, which is the highest ranked by far of the local Big Four teams. And some of their advanced, deeper numbers are actually pretty strong overall. Adjusted efficiency, they are 84th in the country out of 360 teams. Their offensive adjusted efficiency is actually 187th, which is 4 spots higher than UB, which is funny because UB plays high tempo and St. Bonaventure plays it slower. But then when you look at stuff like effective field goal percentage defense, Bana, 54th in the country. They are doing a good job limiting teams. Bana is 5th in the nation in 3-point field goal percentage defense, holding teams to 24.5%. They have a good block percentage. They're decent at forcing steals. Offensively, they're also good in both of those categories at holding on to the ball and not turning it over. This is a team that has ability.
Yes,
They have the guys. This is where it's all about development. And when you're talking about 2 of your starters being sophomores and your other 2 being freshmen, it's all there. It's going to take time. It's a little bit different than the UB story, because UB, I think, with the way they play and being in a little bit easier conference, we see the path to where even though they're not extremely talented, UB has a path to where they can still compete for the top of the conference. I don't see that path for St. Bonaventure in the Atlantic 10 right now. That doesn't mean that at the end of the season, they can't make a run in the A10 tourney. But that's going to be asking a lot for this squad. And the main reason why I say that, when their big 3 of Lofton, Osun, and Dominic Welch were able to make an A10 finals appearance as freshmen, was a team that had 2 incredible freshman guards. I know Dom Welch wasn't incredible right away as a freshman, but Kyle Lofton was very solid as a freshman. And Osun was a game changer with his height and what he brought to the table. I think it's going to take longer for these guys to really be high-level impact. But one thing I would like to see as the year goes on, I want to see Jan Farrell receive a higher share of scoring touches, scoring opportunities. Right now, he's around 9.5 points a game, 7 rebounds. I want Jan Farrell to be 13 points a game. I want him to get a few more opportunities to score, because I think he has that ability in him. And I want to see Chad Venning be a guy that just gets opportunities in the post and let him go to work. Let him use his size. Reduce that Daryl Banks shot load. there's a reason at St. Peter's he wasn't putting up 13 and a half shots per game. He was a volume guy at St. Peter's, but they limited it a little bit. If Banks is going to be forced to play 39 minutes a game and put up 13 and a half shots for the rest of the season, the Bonnies are going to hover around 500. If they can reduce that number a little bit and get some other production from other sources, I feel a little bit more confident about them going forward. Not like I said, I don't think Banks is a bad player, but I do think Bana is being forced to over rely on him due to their lack of other suitable options behind him.
Yep. They're definitely relying on him to play a lot of minutes. And again, I love conference play. It kind of shows you what you're all about. So as they open up conference play, in a couple of weeks here, a few more non-conference opponents, but December 31st, home against UMass and Olean. So it'll be awesome to see that. So, Big Four hoops kind of in a state of, I don't know right now, right? We don't really have a pulse, Mike. It's almost the new year, and we don't really still have a pulse on these teams.
Weird year. They've been good. Well, UB and St. Bonaventure have been solid for going back the last 6-7 years. This is the first year going back to maybe 2013, pre Bobby Hurley, where you really don't have a solid pulse on the future of any of these schools.
No.
So it's kind of limbo because yes, Bana had a rebuilding year when they first got the big three, but UB was playing at a high level at that point in time. Yes. And with Canisius and Niagara, because UB and Bana were getting all the attention, people have kind of let them struggle in the background. But that's what kind of stinks for UB and St. Bonaventure for their season. Might end up being a plus for Niagara, an opportunity to give them a little bit more publicity this year if they are able to have an above 500 season. I want to be able to give the Purple Eagles more attention. I'm hoping that they can be a MAC contender, because how great would it be for Niagara to win 18, 19 games, have them be a top 4 team in the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference, and having Greg Paulus getting some airtime in the MAC tournament. So I'd love to see that.
Yeah. I would love to see some competitive basketball in March. And speaking of competitive basketball, Mike, and winning, I just want to give a shout out to former UB head coach Nate Oates. The first time in a long time that any team has beaten 2 number 1 teams in the same year, let alone the same month almost. Definitely in the first 2 months, as they beat Houston on the road on Saturday afternoon. It was an awesome game to watch, Mike. Rochester native Jaden Bradley had 12 points for Alabama. It was an awesome game to watch. They were down 13 on the road at Houston. And Nate Oates brings his squad back, which the Tide are now ranked 4th in the country. They'll host Memphis tomorrow night, and then a neutral floor game with Gonzaga next week. So Brian Hodgson and company over there, Nate Oates and Dom Welch still yet to suit up, coming back from his ankle injury. Hope to have him back soon, but never shying away from the challenge. Is Nate Oates. So it's awesome to see him playing well, Mike. It's awesome to see, like I said, Bradley, the Rochester guy, getting a lot of run too. So we're gonna wrap up here on episode 6 already, Mike. We've been doing this for a month and a half now, talking Big Four hoops on a Monday night. So, Mike, I want to thank you for joining me. And any last little thoughts here as we enter another week of Big Four hoops?
Yeah, we're entering that Christmas lull where it's going to be a little quiet these next couple of weeks as teams have finals and the holidays and everything like that. But important time for teams to kind of use that to get some rest, enjoy the season, and then gear up for conference play, because that's when it gets real. And even when these teams aren't playing their best, conference play matters. And it's not about at-large bids this year. It's not about trying to make a top 25. It rarely is in the Big Four. This is how you make or break seasons. And you could struggle in non-conference play. If you can make it work in conference play, you can really make a name for yourself. So I'm excited to see how all these teams do in the upcoming weeks. And then my Ohio Bobcats play Florida this week on ESPN2. So go Bobcats. Try to find a way to pull a miracle against Florida. They recently had a last-second buzzer beater against Youngstown State on Sunday. So can't wait to see Ohio and what they're capable of doing this year.
He's Mike Bunt. I'm Jonathan Snyder. We'll see you next Monday. We're still talking Big Four hoops every Monday, 6:30 here on YouTube and on Twitter.